All right, we're live again. Wow.
Yay. we're out in the ether.
We are.
So hello. Welcome
Hello.
to Project Failure Files. I'm Sharon Weaver, CEO of Smarter Consulting.
And I am Christian Buckley, founder of Collab Talk. And welcome to episode 2 of this new series where Sharon and I will explain what not to do as you manage projects.
This series is geared towards anyone and everyone who has ever had the title of project manager or something similar. As someone responsible for leading or overseeing projects, or really simply put, if you've ever managed a project, this show is definitely for you.
And in each episode of the Project Failure Files, we'll talk about some of the common pitfalls in project management, sharing some of our personal stories and experiences. And Sharon and I were already talking backstage about some of what we're going to cover today. Very excited. And exploring the strategies and best practices, do the air quotes there, to help you be successful. And I love approaching content topics like this from this angle. Essentially, not what do you need to do, but what do you not want to do? What should you stop doing? Nip it in the bud. And we hope to have a good mixture of both the theoretical as well as practical examples.
So for this episode, we're talking about the problem of having too many cooks in the kitchen. In other words, the problem of excessive decision makers.
Yeah, over the next 30-ish minutes, we'll be refining our approach, of course, to how we do these episodes. So Sharon and I, we're work in progress here on this. But for the most part, our intent is to follow a basic structure. So first, we'll define and outline the topic. So having too many cooks in the kitchen. We'll talk about it, dissect it a bit, and then do some basic analysis of the problem.
And then after that, we'll share some real life stories, relevant case studies that we maybe come across, and then help you understand the scope of the issue.
And third, we want to talk about the practical solutions, hopefully providing you with some actionable steps to improve your project management skills.
And we also have to address the cultural issues, because to make any kind of lasting change, you have to understand how each issue impacts your team and total organizational dynamics overall.
That's a huge issue. The cultural is, I think it is probably the biggest of all the issues, because you can have a successful idea, concept, you can have all the tools, like all those things in place. And if it's not a cultural fit, then you're still going to struggle with that. And so I think at the end, and this is probably what most people are interested in, what are those preventive measures? What can I do to make sure that this doesn't happen? I know that's a lot, again, to cover, Sharon, in 30 to 40 minutes, but that's the basic pattern for each episode going forward. We'll tweak things each week as we get into a rhythm, of course.
So let's kick things off and talk about having too many cooks in the kitchen. And of course, feel free to comment throughout all of the episodes, share your experiences, any great examples of like feedback or things we might have missed. Feel free to throw those in the comments. Feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear your stories as well.
Yeah. All right. So let's get started. Let's talk about it. When you hear this, I mean, what are your first thoughts, Sharon, about too many cooks in the kitchen?
It's really funny because I've been doing project management for so long that I immediately think of everybody arguing over what decisions are going to be made and sitting in a room of people that all have already preconceived notions of what is going to happen. And most of the time, everybody has a different need, a different experience, a different perspective, a different opinion. And a lot of them all think that they're going to be the decision maker in all of this.
Yeah, it's exactly that. I would just think of how many projects that I've been on that have had that broader scope where even you call a meeting, you're the PM in charge of that effort, and it's the herding cats. It's the getting all the right people into the room, and inevitably you have people that you try to identify the stakeholders as best you can, the people that have the ability to make decisions. You get them in the same room, and they're all off chasing their perspective of things. It makes me think of that old, that meme now, like the blind men like touching the elephant, and they all have a different description. If you're familiar with that, I guess I should have that imagery ready to share. But that one of them grabs the tail and thinks this is like a rope, and somebody else touches the leg and says, "This is like a tree trunk," and somebody touches the trunk and they think it's a snake, like a snake.
And they all want something different out of it too. I think they all want it to be something specific too. And that's part of the problem is that, we talk about what not to do. Well, we're only giving those people a piece, right? So I think, we talk about what not to do and the problems that we've encountered. Oftentimes, when people come to the table to talk about doing a project or to get those stakeholders in the room, they only have insight into their particular piece of the project. To your point of this kind of blind people looking at the elephant, they only see their piece of it.
Right. It also makes me think this problem of the decisions made by committee, and that's one of the the most painful things is knowing that, hey, we have a lot of discussion, and this is the whole paralysis by analysis. Everybody wants to sit around and talk and talk and talk, and then but we need to move things forward. So that I think that adequately outlines like the definition of that. So maybe talk about that, on the practical solution side. How have you solved that?
Yeah, well, and I think it's interesting. One of the things you talked about is, having these committees. I think often one of the problems is that the people on the committees have no skin in the game for the project itself. So you'll see, different, especially larger companies that have committees with people who have no idea what is at stake in the project or what's going to happen. And so I talked before about this idea of only having this one little lens into your piece of the pie. And one of the ways that I've solved that in the past, and I'm notorious for this, and this, I can only get away with this sometimes as a consultant, is who are the actual people that need to participate and getting them all in one room together, whether that's physically or virtually, but it's getting them on the same page. Let's have everybody come to the table to have this conversation so that everybody sees the bigger picture together. And then we can decide at the end of the day, who is the person that actually needs to be making the decisions? Where does the buck stop? Who are the people that it's going to impact? Because if you have people on a committee making a decision for people where they literally have nothing to do with it, that can cause more problems than it solves.
Well, we had that the issue where, just like you said, we have this having run a number of governance committees and just multi-organizational initiatives, things around that, is that you have people that show up, it's like, oh, such and such couldn't make it today, I'm here. It's like, okay, so you have the ability to make decisions on their behalf. No, I'm basically taking notes. I'm like, okay, well, then we can't make a decision because we don't have the right people here to make that decision. And nothing more frustrating I hear back from, again, this may be over the top for smaller organizations or even consultants around this, but having run, IT and corporate governance initiatives where you have all those stakeholders, the two most important steps to this, to get to that point where, one, having the leader, whether it's the CEO or a VP or a senior person in the organization, that says, hey, this is ultimately my project and this is how we're going to approach this. So we have the support of this VP, for example, of we will go and take this action, and here's the budget, here's the scope, whatever those things are. Then you gather those people together. The second step to make that successful was having that process in place. And I'm not talking about having this big bureaucracy of decision making. In fact, the leaner and meaner you can make it. But this is where, again, I'm thinking of a specific example, sitting in a room where we had a process where we had the project plan, we were talking about exceptions, here's what's moving through. When people then it's all about the change management model, people would bring in, we need to make this adjustment. All right, we'll bring it to the board of these stakeholders. And so they wanted a decision made. It was in the notes, like, in this next meeting, we're going to be discussing these three things. We have to have decisions around these three things. And if the right stakeholders weren't there for that one decision, we put it aside till the next meeting. Like, I'm sorry, I know it was urgent. The right people are not here. But what I found is that over time, people respected the process. They understood it. And then they start saying, we need to make sure we have the right person. They understood the seriousness of missing out on those sessions to get their votes in, to get their voice heard, to move the project forward. Otherwise, if we had consensus with the people, the stakeholders that were there, and again, everybody agreed to the process up front, and they got voted out because they weren't there, or again, you're not disrespecting the fact that somebody has an opposing, opinion on something. Their heard, is discussed, and then a decision is made. And as part of this process with this group was that we would not leave, even if you got voted down, until everybody understood why that decision was made to move forward. And with project management, it's usually people, time, or cost, one of those factors.
I think I think to your point, having the right people in the room to make those decisions is crucial, because often if you have meeting upon meeting upon meeting with the wrong people in the room, you never make any progress. You're essentially just wasting time. And I think people value decisions being made and things moving forward. And oftentimes the first person they're going to go after to bring back in to do that is the people who make sure that change is happening. Whether they like it or not is irrelevant. And I think that's, when we talk about what not to do, I think placating people, when we have, too many people, a lot of times we'll placate people. We'll get in a room and everybody will nod and smile to keep from, ruffling feathers. And I think one of the things as consultants that we're brought in to do, it's, maybe not to ruffle feathers on purpose, but to kind of force that change to happen, to say, look, we need to get to a done point. We need to get this to where there's a decision being made. We need to make this where we're moving forward. We need to make sure that something is happening. And I think, getting the right people in the room to be able to continue to make progress is really important. Otherwise, you're just having meetings to have meetings. And that's exactly what everybody wants, is more meetings to have meetings,
I don't know what your policy on this was, but there were the part of my discussion with, again, this is one example that I'm thinking of, and I've had similar experiences, but conversation going back up to that project owner, that VP, was tattling on stakeholders that were not taking it seriously. And I said, look, there's only so much power I had as the PM driving this process. I said, you need to go lay down the law. Here's the conversation you need to have. Like this team, if they feel like, hey, we think like we're being representative, we feel like there's the discussion is good, we trust that's different than people not showing. What was more likely to happen, I had one director that there was a problem where he or his team members would never show up, and then they'd complain about, like, I never had my chance. Like, that is your window. So that's why I go back to saying that if you've got that top level support, if you have the process in place, you can then have those discussions. And I think the way that I phrase it too, Sharon, of like having those sometimes hard discussions, those tough discussions, was having a clinical approach to the project. It's not favorites. It's not, who's right or wrong around this. Like, here's the facts, here's the data. This is what we need to move forward. And decisions are made. Here's what we need to go do next around this project. When, again, I'd say it again and again and again, when people understand the process, they're more likely to observe, follow, and trust in the process.
Yeah. Well, that, gets to the cultural element, which we talk about a lot, is the mix of, first of all, is the team, whoever it is that's going to be doing this, the stakeholders, are they bought in to what's happening? Do they trust the group? Do they trust the leadership? Do they trust the process? And that really comes back to everything from, cultural dynamics to maturity of the organization, to the maturity of the leaders. And so there's all these variables, all these places where culturally this can be impacted, good and bad, right? So if you have a low maturity level or a toxic environment or bad leadership, I mean, that could be causing the project to fail, and it has nothing to do with the project itself. Whereas if you have a cultural environment of trust and good leadership and good understanding and good maturity levels, then even a project that's a little wonky sometimes can actually have a higher success of being moved forward, because the leadership will step in or the culture will be like, no, we don't want to put up with this kind of, waiting around. We want to get something done. And so I think there's something really important to be said about, having a good, healthy cultural environment to start with that will make projects more successful overall.
And I would argue, again, going back to that top, if you've got that top level support, that's where culture starts, with the leadership and what they, what they go and enforce, what they encourage. I mean, use whatever adjective you want for that, but they believe in that process. Because if you can have great ideas, a great solution, if you don't have that top level support for it, it's going to fail.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that so many times when I come in. And what's really interesting is, consultants are typically brought in the middle of a mess. Like, that's just when consultants are brought in, because it's when the pain has become so bad. You think about, when do you go to the doctor? When do you go to the dentist? When do you go to the store, right? It's when the pain has gotten so bad about needing something that you're like, okay, fine, it's worth investing the money and getting somebody to help me. Consulting is no different. People call us when they're like, okay, we've gone down this path and now we need help. And that's not to say all of them do. Sometimes people are at a more mature level and they know, we have planned, we have budgeted, we know what we need and when we need it. But I would say more often than not, people call when they have a problem, people call when they have a mess. And so I think when we think about this particular topic, what ends up happening is so many people have different opinions on something. So many people want to do something. Oftentimes, you'll get a large business where different business units have already gone down the same path and they're all implementing something similar to each other. And somebody somewhere at a leadership level or in a steering committee level, if it's a good mature culture, recognizes, we have 5 business units going down the same path. We're headed for a problem if we don't get our arms around this. And so I think, one of the things to think about too, in the vein of this topic, is, do you have something in place at a leadership level or at a committee level on a good side of recognizing when you've got the same initiative kind of starting to sprout up in multiple areas, so that you can get your arms around it before each of those different places implement something different?
You're getting into what used to be my whole world. Was so I got into, like, I've known Sharon for a big chunk of my information management solution experience, that part of my career. But early on, I was building PMOs, I was doing change management. My life was project and portfolio management and giving organizations that portfolio view. If you don't understand what's happening in your environment, you're never going to be able to go and make the decisions to go and integrate those things in. But you're right. As consultants, a lot of what we do is we go in and we're cleaning up that mess. There have been a few organizations, companies that I've worked with that had good change management and project cultures. And it's such a strength. Again, you don't have to be on the latest, greatest technologies. But when you have a culture where people understand, like, hey, there's this new idea. We need to discuss that. Where do I take this? And they're like, oh, okay, we have the every other week. There's the PMO meets and reviews all the various initiatives. It's a place to talk about what's up and coming, if there's overlap, and as part of that. Look at that. Even in our world, working in the Microsoft stack, the collaboration stack with Teams and SharePoint, how big of a problem that is, that you just naming conventions for projects, being able, people going and creating digital assets, overlapping things that have already existed. People don't often take the time to do that discovery, to go search and see what's truly out there and understand whether their new idea fits within something that already exists, has already been tried, and the history of that and why it failed or succeeded. But to go and do some research. So having a centralized, again, it's just being a consultant now, having worked in this project portfolio management space, I'm a big believer in the shared services model, the PMO model, so that you can centralize that knowledge. And it's like, once again, if people understand that structure is there, they will go and look there first and understand how, oh, you know what, I need to be a stakeholder in that ongoing project because this actually impacts us, and then get added into that project.
So what you're saying, what I'm hearing, is that there needs to be a healthy maturity level process and defined leadership all set up so that people know what to expect, they know where to look, they know what to do, so that when they want something, instead of just randomly going and doing it, they say, I want X thing, or I want, this change. And there is a process they can follow to know I identified the change I need. I know if I'm going to be able to get it, and there's going to be somebody to champion to make sure that if they say they're going to do it, they actually are going to get it done.
So I would say yes to all that. Of course, the reality is that for a lot of folks that are watching this and watching the recordings of this, we're in smaller organizations, there's not that infrastructure in place. And so all of that has to be encapsulated into the role of the PM that's going and driving these things. Like, that's where, if I get a new assignment, one of the first questions I ask is like, well, who's the leadership sponsor for this project? Who owns this? And then understand the process. And especially as a consultant going in, one of my first things to do is to understand, what is the project methodology? What is the culture around how things move forward? And it's usually been, well, it's kind of loosey-goosey depending on,
right. Make our own methodology here.
Well, but some of that is, so you need a strong PM to go in and maybe not build that, but for that project, especially if you're brought in as an outside consultant, ultimately you care what you're being paid on is that project, not fixing the rest of the infrastructure, the operations inside that organization. But that's something that you can, lead by example and go and say, hey, you've hired me. This is my expertise. This is what we need to do. Executive buy-in, drive for this project, and then coach and mentor other PMs and operations, folks, IT folks along the way, so that structure can bleed into the other projects and they can start to develop their culture.
Yeah, no, I definitely think there's something to be said there. And, it's kind of funny. I meet people all the time. And once you get to know me, I guess one of the traits about me is I just get things done. I get tired of sitting and waiting and trying to deal with all of the, nuances and how we're going to do this and who's going to be involved and can everybody agree. And I want to be as inclusive and open-minded and allow everybody to share their dreams and goals and wishes and fantasies and all of these meetings too. But at the end of the day, as a project manager, your job is to deliver the project. It's to get it done. So when you put your little project management hat on and you're in that role, I do believe that your job is to really say, okay, I'm going to take all this stuff. To your point, not going to fix everything. We're going to talk about that in another episode, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to try to fix everything. That is not my goal to achieve right now. My goal is to put my little blinders on, look at the project at hand, and make sure that I have all the right tools I need and all the right sponsorship I need and all the right information to get this project across the finish line. That's all I care about. That should be my 100% job. So if you're a project manager or you're acting as a project manager, you need to remember, you're not just a facilitator, right? Sometimes we talk about facilitation and the idea of making sure things happen. You're also kind of like the quarterback, right? You're making sure that ball is going to get across the end zone when all of this is done.
And it's and part of that too, again, people not showing up to that organizational, that launch, that project launch event or meeting. I mean, that's the big problem. That's where you're going to say, look, here's what our end goal is. This is our the outcome we're looking to achieve. Here's the stakeholders. Here's the process. Lay all that out in that launch meeting. And some of the people that you need to have there, some of the stakeholders, they couldn't make it or they refused to participate, whatever that is. How do you solve for that? What's been your experience solving for that?
I mean, I think to the point of saying the project manager is the person kind of carrying everybody, I think there has to be consensus at a cultural level of who is carrying the ball and how is the play going to work. And so sometimes when you're not sure who's going to show up, think about it. I mean, if you think about it from a football analogy or from a sports analogy, like, if all the players don't show up, then somebody's got to carry that ball down. You're going to have really tired people. And so you need to remind people, look, we're all here. We're all part of a team. Everybody needs to be here to get this done. And if you're not here, at the end of the day, the project manager is going to run the ball, right? But it's a whole lot easier and it's going to be a whole lot faster and a whole lot better if the whole team participates in the way that they should. So I think to some degree, I try to go the motivational, inspirational route of we're all in it together. You want to know what's happening. You don't want to feel like you're missing out on what's happening. You don't want to feel like what you said about the person before that's like, well, I didn't get to have my voice heard. I didn't get to participate. And then I always get somebody at the end, I didn't know this was happening. When did you communicate this was happening? Right? If you want to be in the know and you want to have your voice heard and you want to participate and you want to help your teammates to be successful, show up.
Yeah. Well, and one, again, my experience with that, I wish I had learned this earlier, but was to, yes, you've got your launch, your official kickoff of that. Again, it might be mid-project. You're brought in to clean up the mess. It's good still. There's nothing wrong with having, maybe don't call it a launch event because the project's already launched, but you have that kind of come to the table. All of us, this is the stakeholder. It's mandatory. You must be here. And you have people that are not going to show up or voicing opposition to some of the ideas, is to go and sit with each of them and the other key people in their department and have that conversation up front.
Mhm.
Say, this is coming from the leader. Here's our process, our structure. If you are, you must send somebody that has the ability to vote up or down on an initiative. If you don't send a representative, that the way that we will interpret that is that you are fine with the decision that's made with the room. So a no-show is a yes vote to whatever the body agrees to. And
Mhm.
I even at one project, because this was, again, this very large project, this was like a 2,000 person organization, the VP over it wanted signatures
Oh yeah.
from her direct reports that they understood this plan, and then she had signed it. So like up there and had their signatures. So there was no denying that they didn't know about it. Like, look, that's hardcore. There were some serious cultural issues that forced, our hand on getting them to do this. But anyway, I'm not saying that that's a best practice.
People
But
forget, man. People forget. A year down the road, you'd be like, look,
right.
You read it, you signed it.
But going and sitting down with them and saying, hey, we've got this launch event, this activity coming up this meeting next week. This is a structure. I just want to walk through, make sure I understand at a high level what you voice your concerns around this. If you have any side interests out of this, just so that we make sure that it encompasses kind of everything around that. And I initially, so on that exact project, and again, having done it several times at different companies and large enterprises to small regional companies, had done similar things as a consultant. This is like 25 years ago when I got started in this space. I've been in tech for 33 years this year. So I know you're about exactly the same. Yeah.
Almost 30.
Yeah. So, but with that, having had those conversations, with that initial launch event, like all of the key stakeholders and their direct reports, their lieutenants showed up for that launch. Subsequent meetings, once they got comfortable with that, and they say, though, there's nothing they would even say, hey, I'm not going to be at this meeting. I don't have an opinion on any of what's being discussed on the schedule.
Yep.
And so they really strictly followed. We would tell them, next meeting, this is what we're going to cover. These decisions have to be made. Here are the people that need to be there. And so that was our reporting, our documentation around that. We gave that to them so that they knew, hey, this is an important topic. I loved that, where we'd have one of the weeks. So we were doing it weekly for a while, where there'd be like, of this 2,000 person organization, there'd be like maybe 8 or 9 people in the room. The next one, because of the topics on the agenda, there'd be like 20 people standing around the room, that not even the primary stakeholders, but were there and wanted to make sure that they understood and could voice their opinions about a decision. It was fantastic to see it working.
Yes, absolutely. No, it's exciting.
Well, I think if we, I guess we should have said again, I mean, any other comments, anybody else out there, any other questions about this that maybe scenarios we've not covered, please comment. I mean, if you're commenting out on, I think where we see them is YouTube, LinkedIn, of course. I don't think we see the ones from Twitter over here, but Facebook as well, I think, all come into this panel here. But feel free to comment. And of course, after the recording, if you're watching this on demand, if you're watching this out on the various site, comment. Sharon and I will be compiling all of this. There's a lot of background work that's being done around these episodes. So folks know this is, we've been talking about this for months and months and months, getting ready for this. And there's stuff happening after this as well. So
your voice will be heard.
Yes. So please voice your opinion, share your thoughts there. But all right. Well, we're over 30 minutes here. Want to respect that as best we can. Sometimes we'll go a little bit longer, but any final closing thoughts, Sharon?
Oh, I mean, I think at the end of the day, just remember, there's a goal. And sometimes you have too many cooks in the kitchen. Just make sure you guys all know who has the highest hat.
And I should throw in too, please follow us, subscribe. Recordings will be available. Of course, you'll find them on the socials where it's streamed to, but primarily the channel will be out on YouTube. If you follow me, I'm as Buckley Planet, at Buckley Planet on YouTube, you'll be able to find all the episodes. And we're also starting to produce shorts and push that content out there. So more coming, and we'll also do some other expanding on these topics, depending on the topic and questions. We may respond and create videos where we're doing nothing but responding to questions and comments around each episode. So you definitely want to subscribe and follow along. And again, we're here every Monday at this same time. So hopefully we'll see you live next week.
See you next time.
And I should be ready with the video just to hit play for this, but I had to click a couple things, but we'll see you next time.